Welcome back to the Media Maestros pod. We're so glad you joined us. We're glad to have you with us. And we couldn't do it without you. I'm one half of your team, Ram, with the one and only Ray. Thank you for joining us. We're excited to get back into it. Ray, how are things going, my guy?
Things are going great, Ram. It's another great day, back on the pod, and I'm excited to get into our topic.
No place I would rather be. No place I would rather be. I was doing some research and I was
Okay.
a little excited. I saw an article. It actually got me a little disappointed. It said Chance the Rapper's new album is coming next year. I thought it would be next month. It's coming out next year, so I'm a little sad about that. You share my feelings? What are you thinking?
Um, I can wait.
Oh,
I don't know, man. I He's had like a couple singles since the big day, but the stench of the big day is still in the air.
wow, wow, that's crazy. The stench.
Yeah. Because it's
Wow.
one thing to just drop like kind of a lackluster project,
Hmm.
like Corday did, in my opinion, with Bird's Eye View,
Yeah,
or Roddy Rich did with his second album.
yeah.
But the Big Day, that's a stinker in my opinion.
I went back and listened to it. I'll be the one to take the. I think it was actually a decent album.
Really,
Call Me Crazy. He had a lot of tracks. He had
he did.
Lil Durk, Nicki Minaj. He had I think the
Okay,
fact was that it was a wholesome album. People aren't really feeling wholesome albums these days.
I don't think that's the problem. I've heard that. I don't think I don't think the subject matter is necessarily the problem. I
Okay.
can't. I don't think any of those songs like they try to make Hot Shower like a thing, but even that song itself is corny.
That
It's
one
kind
was
of
corny.
corny.
That one was corny.
But the songs just didn't stick. The production just wasn't as good as his last couple projects before that. That's the reason that I'm never going back to it, honestly.
That's fair. Well, we'll have to wait until next year to see what he does with this follow-up. But I'm optimistic.
I mean, anything's possible. He might come back strong. We'll see.
Anything's possible. Well, speaking of stinkers, Logic's new album dropped.
Okay.
But I'm gonna stand on it. Let me get close to the camera and say this.
Okay. I'm
Logic's
listening.
album was really good.
Really?
It was really good. It was called College Park, and it was a really cool concept album. He and I will get more into this maybe a couple episodes down the road, but it was a concept album where he took a look back as to all the places he dreamed to be in the future and how, what he would do, what he wouldn't do. And he did a great job of weaving in who he was into who
Mhm.
he's become and kind of the why and the how behind that without focusing the entire album around being half black and half white.
Oh, thank goodness. That was taxing.
But I thought it was great. This is just a quick shout out. I think people should check it out. A little callback to last episode for those that listened to episode 4.
There was one particular song that's gotten a lot of buzz on TikTok. It's the one featuring Seth MacFarlane, where he's doing
Mm.
the Frank Sinatra uh, hook esque.
Was that the Frank Sinatra flip?
I think so. I haven't heard the song. They play the Seth MacFarlane part
Hmm.
on like it's a sound on TikTok, and everyone's like loving that specific aspect of it. So I do want to check that song out. But is he spitting?
There are a lot of songs up there, a lot of real standout moments where you remember who Logic really is. A guy that can
Mm,
spit, a guy that can rap, a guy with a lot of perspective that
okay.
is valuable when you really focus on what he's doing and not necessarily all about where he came from. So I enjoyed it. I think people would like it if they check it out.
Okay. I can't say I'm too surprised because I did like No Pressure quite a bit.
Hmm.
That was a good one. I
I
also
agree.
liked was it Young Sinatra 4, I think was a
Yep.
recent one.
Mixtape
So
follow.
it's just been up and down. That's the problem. It's not that he hasn't put out anything good in the past few years, but you look back at Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, which wasn't it.
Hmm.
And then Supermarket, whatever that was.
Had to pass on that one. I passed on that as well. I passed on that as well.
So, you just gotta you just don't know for sure what you're gonna get. But I'm glad to hear that this one's actually a good release.
That's a great point. I was looking forward to it, and I'm glad it finally came.
All right. So, speaking of things that finally came, you saw Creed 3, right?
I did. I did. You talk about blockbuster, you talk about highly anticipated. I'd love for every single person listening to go check out Creed 3 in theaters, whether you find it matinee, main
Mm,
showtime, weekend. That was my favorite movie I've seen in maybe the last year.
really?
That's
All
really
of
high praise.
2022.
That's really high praise. And
Wow.
this was, as we know, it's Michael B. Jordan's directorial debut.
That's right.
And I mean, he knocked it out of the park. I
Okay.
feel like he had Jonathan Majors alongside him, who I had personally had never seen act before.
Wait.
I've never seen Lovecraft County. I've never seen Ant-Man, as we talked about last week,
Or Loki.
or
Dang.
the Loki episode. So for me, this was yeah, I heard a lot about this guy. Who's this guy? Okay. I get the hype.
Really?
I get
You-
the hype. There were moments I found myself watching the movie and forgetting that this guy is not a boxer. This guy is not some misguided teen from the inner cities of LA. This is a theater kid, but
mm,
he sells the role so well.
okay.
I
That's
mean,
good to
there's
hear.
so much emotion, there's so much feeling, there's so much passion. I felt like these guys really knew each other from 20 years back and they had bad blood. He knocked it out of the park. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but I
Hmm.
loved the acting, the cinematography, storytelling. It was so elegantly weaved, but also so kind of action packed that kept you on the edge of your seats. I will say one complaint is that it did feel a little rushed.
Okay.
I think they tried to tell a big story in what, 2.5 hours. I think that it's the type of thing that could have benefited from maybe a second movie, but I get why you want to fit it all in one. I loved
Mm.
it, man. I really loved it.
Do you see the Creed franchise continuing on the same way the Rocky franchise will get like Rocky or Creed 7 at some point? Or do you think it's dwindling down?
I think we could. And the way the movie ends, it kind of alludes to where it might be going next.
Okay.
Don't want to give away any spoilers, but for those that have seen it, you
Sure.
know exactly what I'm talking about. It it's a movie with a lot of potential, even in
Mm.
the fact that this is kind of concluding the trilogy of the three. But I could see it kind of extending into that 6, 7 range. But the thing is that even Rocky, 5, 6, 7, it was to the point where it was like, all right, bro, like I get what you're doing. Like we've gotten enough.
Sure.
So I
And
don't know
there
it needs to.
that's fair. There have been reports of uh, either Jonathan or Michael or someone saying how that duo could be the next Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. Do you think that they have as strong as chemistry as those legends and can carry on multiple movies together?
So the chemistry, yes. I mean, these guys, as I said, there were moments where I forgot, like, this is just for play. Like, this is just a movie.
Right.
These guys aren't real boxers. They aren't real fighters. They really sold it well. But I will say, and I hate to be, the bearer of bad news, but Jonathan Majors and Michael B. Jordan, they're on
Mismatch.
they're on different planets when it comes to acting. I'm not trying to be offensive. They're on different planets. I mean, Jonathan Major, he's like this guy's like Denzel range. Michael B.
Yeah.
Jordan is like Terrence Howard range, and that's
it's
no
it's
disrespect.
it's been a common thing where people kind of pick at Michael B. Jordan's actual acting ability, and Jonathan Majors has been getting a lot of credibility in that field. It's kind of like when I saw the movie Don't Worry, Darling. I don't know if you caught that one, but you had Florence Pugh, who's a Academy caliber actress, doing scenes with Harry Styles, who does not stand up at all. And it was a little, you could definitely see the difference in ability there. So it sounds like it's similar to that a little bit.
And I think, some actors get by on their looks.
Sure.
You think about Creed, a boxer, cut, chiseled, Michael B. Jordan, looked great. But
Hmm.
when it comes to Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, these guys run the gamut of roles they can play,
Sure.
perspectives, how they take on a role. Michael B. Jordan has yet to demonstrate that. He did great in The Wire, but I don't know if he's given us enough to say he can stand on that level. I'm not
That's a
going to
good
count
point.
him out. I'm optimistic eternally. I wish him the best, but it'll
Hmm.
be exciting to see. I think the next 5 to 10 years really could bring big things for those guys.
Absolutely. I'm interested to see where their careers go.
I think it'll be exciting. Well, speaking of triangulation,
Okay.
I know you had a movie to share with us too this week. What have you been seeing?
Yeah, so this past weekend, the AMC that is a little bit down the way that I go to was having an Oscar showcase. So they're showing all of the Best Picture nominated movies because the Oscars are coming out this weekend, actually. And one of those is a movie called Triangle of Sadness. It is it's a very odd movie.
Hmm.
It the premise is basically you have this couple. They're models. They come from that kind of glamorous life,
Hmm.
and they end up taking this cruise. And that at that point, the story just goes in some crazy places.
Okay.
So this is a film that you really just have to like strap in and just go for the ride. It's not something that's like super believable. It's a little bit fantastical, surreal.
Okay.
It reminds me of something like Swiss Army Man.
Okay.
For those out there that might have seen that one, it just it's just a wild adventure of a movie, but it's a movie that's satire in a similar way that The Menu was that came
Oh,
out
okay.
last year.
Okay.
It's a satire. It's poking fun at the elite
Okay.
and breaking down classism and issue capitalism and things of that nature. Kind of also similar to a Parasite.
Okay.
So there's a lot of great substance in the movie. It plays as a comedy in a lot of points because of just how absurd it is.
Hmm.
The things that the characters say and do, they end up in these like wild predicaments. So it's a fun watch for sure.
Now, is this the kind of satire, dramedy as a White Lotus might be? Or is this kind of more akin to a Babylon and its historical kind of over the top exposure of how this side of America is? What would you say?
I think White Lotus is a good comparison. I haven't seen season two.
Okay.
I've only seen most of season one, which I hate, by the way. I think it's unbearable. But if we're just talking about the content of the show, it's similar. It's and there's actually like a entire like the main third act is them on this beach stranded, and it kind of reminds you of because you have these people that are from this high class and
Hmm.
they're having to deal with being in this incredibly disastrous situation, and just how uh distanced they are from actually having to struggle, and showing their privilege, showing how inept they are in just basic human survival things. It's again, it's played for laughs, but you
Hmm.
also can kind of like really take the deeper meanings that the director writers is trying to say throughout the movie, and I think it's overall it's done very well.
Okay. Well, that's exciting, man. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it with the Oscar season coming up and
Hmm.
definitely checking it out if I get the chance. Triangle of Sadness.
Triangle of Sadness, yeah, one of my favorites of the Oscar noms so far. I have one more to watch, but that's a good one for sure.
Okay. Well, we'll see how it performs Oscar weekend.
Looking forward to that.
Well, speaking of ineptitude,
Okay.
you mentioned that there was a show coming up that's been at the top of everyone's list of must watch the last couple years, right?
Mm. Yeah, the season three of Ted Lasso is releasing very soon. It is a show that Jason Sudeikis keeps getting the win for best actor in a comedy series.
Yeah.
He's absolutely killing it. That role was made for him,
Yeah.
uh,
In a lot of ways.
essentially. So it's a great show. It's a comedy on Apple TV Plus. It's about a guy who comes from America coaching football. He's in this position of in the UK coaching a soccer team, and just all the trials and tribulations that come with that, and the different characters that he meets along the way that all have their eccentric personalities.
Hmm.
And it just really, it does have like those darker moments where they get into, the psyche of the main character and things that are going on, but it's just a really like wholesome watch overall, I think. And you've been watching it as well, haven't you?
Yeah, as I think about how I feel about the show, I know a lot of listeners, a lot of viewers have been saying, Rembert, you love everything. Everything's the best show ever. You just never have a bad thing to say. I need to come forward and just admit this is my favorite show of all time.
Wow. That is huge.
This show, anyone that really knows me knows that I love sports.
Absolutely.
Everything sports, but I also love, goodness and just smiles and laughs. And
For sure.
this show is like everything that I could. If there was a show that was made for me, this would be
Uh-huh.
it. I mean, there's a football coach who's such a kind-hearted, good man who gets placed in this random predicament. But throughout the way, he never bends on his morals. He never bends on his goodness, his kind-heartedness, even in the face of laughter, the face of despair. But beyond just the main character himself, this show does such an excellent job of character development. I think about from
Absolutely.
season one to season two, as certain characters have evolved and developed, whether that be from, a nice, kind, humble young man into someone that becomes somewhat villainous in their own ego and pride.
Ooh.
As I also think about someone who goes from an arrogant, kind of selfish jerk of a teammate to someone who is a team first, selfless leader. This
Mm-hmm.
show does such a great job of making it, but not necessarily as in some shows you see where, one episode the guy's nice, the next episode the guy's a jerk. One episode the guy was kind-hearted, the next episode the guy's giving people the middle finger. This show weaves in the themes subtly over
Yes,
episodes, piece by piece by piece, until you see, whoa, this is not the person that we grew to love.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a testament to the writing, but also the acting, because every for the past couple years, it's not only Jason Sudeikis that gets nominated. It's essentially the whole cast, all the supporting actors as well get their due because of how great they're playing these characters, and the ones that you fall in love with, the ones that they make you despise. It just works, completely from the first episode to this season two finale. And I'm really, really excited to see where they go in season three. And I believe that you haven't gotten to the season two finale yet. Is that
So I,
right?
I haven't gotten to the finale yet. I kind of see where some things are trending towards, and
Okay.
I'm picking up on some themes along the way of this season, and I'm just blown away at how this every single episode I find myself either moved to laughter or moved to tears or moved
Mm,
to just contemplative thought.
hmm.
I love it. I'm looking forward to season three. Looking forward to finishing season two first, and we'll definitely bring our thoughts right back to the media maestros.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. So, bringing back Creed 3, I believe that this is another soundtrack, because you mentioned the Black Panther soundtrack that was a particular song you enjoyed. This soundtrack, what are your thoughts on this one?
I did. This is another soundtrack, with that Ryan Coogler influence of just being so crafted to fit the movie really well, but also fit the times. I think a lot of these songs are the type that you might hear out, you might hear around, you might hear at a club, you might hear on the radio, you might hear in a playlist. The standout for me by far was the J. Cole interlude.
Mm,
It's called the Adonis interlude, and it flips the
okay.
Watcher by Dr. Dre.
Okay.
And funny enough, Dr. Dre actually produced this track.
Nice.
So that song blew me away. The soundtrack is top quality. A lot of the top artists, you have JID, you
Mm,
have Lute, you have uh J. Cole. You have a lot of
mm.
just premier artists that are kind
Dreamville.
of Dreamville, kind of bringing back that the soundtrack hype. Back in the day, a lot of soundtracks were as sought after as the movies themselves. I think
Yeah.
this follows in line with that. I definitely highly recommend checking that out, even if you haven't seen the movie.
And I was actually a big fan of the first Creed soundtrack. That one in particular, I really enjoyed. It had Meek Mill on there, Childish Gambino on there,
Mm-hmm.
even Tessa Thompson, who
Mm-hmm.
is an actor in the movie, had a song on there. It was really dope. So I look forward to listening to this in the movie and on Spotify as well.
Yeah, it's worth the listen, and I think that people will like it.
All right. So I have a album,
Okay.
and it's an artist that actually appeared on that soundtrack.
Okay.
We got JID, Jid, and he has been killing it for the past few years. You know, premier Dreamville artist, and he's been blowing up for sure. I actually went to a
Mm-hmm.
concert of his.
Oh wow,
Uh, Jid and Smino performed together,
love that.
and it was really dope. He has a lot of great songs. He This particular album is a great balance because he does have those songs where he's just spitting like he
Straight
normally
bars.
does, just
Straight bars.
straight bars. But then he also has the softer songs where he showcases his singing ability. He's
Mm-hmm.
actually
No, a
a
little
really
bit.
tight,
A little bit.
yeah, he's actually can hold a note and get those type of vibes out there as well. So I think this is a great album. It was one of my favorites of last year. And he just continues to keep me engaged and amaze me with his projects. I've been a fan since the Never Story,
Mm-hmm.
and DiCaprio. The DiCaprio projects were also great. So this is just another one, on his discography that shows how great of a new talent that Jid is.
Are there any songs in particular that really stood out in this project?
Oh man, there's a few. I like Brother Them.
Yeah, rather
That's
than
a good one
yeah.
for sure. Um, the big single Surround Sound was a
Mm-hmm.
hit with 21 Savage and Baby Tate. That was dope.
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely like almost every song on this project, and it's versatile.
It is. Great way
There's
to put it.
upbeat, there's slower songs. It's great.
You talk about his singing ability. He tapped in with Ari Lennox, Can't Make You
Mm.
Change.
Oh
That's one of
yeah,
my favorites. Love that one. She did
that's
a
a
great
powerful
job in
one.
that. They both held their
Yeah,
own. I also really recommend his Radar. It's essentially the
that's
first track.
that's a fun one as well.
You talk about bars. I mean, bruh, he's a
He's
spitter.
spitting.
He's
He's
a spitter.
spitting.
He's a spitter. So definitely
Yeah.
recommend. That's a great call out.
But speaking of bars, if we want to get into our blast from the past,
Come
there's
on.
a there's a great show from HBO. We could talk about that a little bit. It's Oz. And what are your thoughts on this great show?
So Oz was a show I started during pretty much during the pandemic, height of the pandemic. And it was a show that I had heard so much about. HBO doesn't miss. You know, they've had
You know,
hit after hit after hit, The Wire, Game of Thrones. I mean, we could have a whole episode about
yeah,
HBO smashes. But I feel like Oz was one of the first that really set the tempo for HBO doing things a bit differently.
it did.
And for those
Yeah.
that don't know, with the Segway King,
Hmm.
Oz is a show that's set in a prison, and essentially it details a somewhat of a alternative prison experience for some imprisoned inmates that are selected to go through this kind of trial. And the show does a great job of getting into, in some ways, what it's like to be in prison. It
Hmm.
also goes through some pretty graphic experiences. You
It's a
know,
brutal
one
show
It's a
for
brutal
sure.
show. This show came out in 2003. So at that time, this was a time, as you all know, where TV was less edgy as it is nowadays. The show definitely detailed a lot that is oft overlooked for those that are imprisoned. And I recommend checking it out for a blast from the past. The show's going on about 20, 25 years old. And it's worth
Hmm.
just seeing how TV has evolved, but also seeing the depth and complexity of a show from a time where TV was different. What would you say, Ray?
Yeah, I think something that I would add to what you've said is that a lot of shows go on for maybe like a couple strong seasons or a few strong
Mm-hmm.
seasons, and then they kind of level out and lose the qualities that you enjoy. I think Oz is one of the few shows where every single season is great, and you
Mm-hmm.
can watch it from the first season to the last season and it's just an enjoyable watch all the way through. You know, it is one of the first, I believe, if not the first, one of the first hour-long dramas on HBO,
Hmm.
and it set the tone for a lot of the greatness that came after it. It's a recommend for sure. If you know subject matter, it's triggering graphic. Anything that you can think of that could happen in a prison happens in this show. They depict everything. So just be prepared for that. But as far as acting, the cast, the writing, directing, cinematography, it's amazing.
Well said. Really well said. Couldn't have said it any better myself. And with that sound, right at time, we thank you all for tapping in for another episode of the Media Maestros podcast, where Ram and Ray, glad to be here with you all. And thank you for listening again. Have a good one.
See y'all.